Well, ladies and gentlemen, the SAVE Act. What exactly is it? I mean, there's been a lot of people talking about both pro and con, but one of the biggest sources of frustration has been the Republican leadership within the United States Senate, specifically Senator John Thune. Senator Mike Lee has repeatedly called for us to at least just bring back the speaking filibuster, because what most people don't understand is that when they think of the filibuster, to the extent that they know what it is and they know why it's there, they think of like the old school movies where somebody stands up there and talks for 48 hours straight on an issue for which they have just a great deal of passion and concern in order to try to stop it in the Senate without having the majority. In reality, all that has to happen nowadays is the opposition party calls up the Senate Majority Leader and says, hey, we're going to filibuster that. And he goes, oh, darn. Well, we don't want to be stuck here for all that time, so I guess we just won't bring it up for a vote. Or if they do bring it up for a vote, they can't actually get cloture. And now the vote was just on whether or not they could vote on it. And the bottom line is the American people look at this and says, this seems stupid. Like if you want to have a filibuster, fine, but there should be something to it. And there traditionally has been until relatively recently. Mike Lee's been asking to bring it back. And John Thune now got in trouble for making a statement to Scott Presler where he apparently said, well, I think with the whole SAVE Act thing, there's a lot of, paid influencers pushing it. Oh, is that a fact? So today, what my good friend, the Oracle of Virginia, Christian Hines, and I are going to do is we're going to go through what is actually in the SAVE Act with respect to the version that the House passed. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the opposition to it and how there's workarounds for all of it. And then here's what we're really going to do, because I have heard way too many claims that voter fraud barely ever happens. I had somebody come on my page and go, Nick, I searched the Heritage Foundation. I can only find 1,600 cases of voter fraud over the last 40 years. And I said, if you believe that's an accurate number, I don't even know how to engage with you. But to demonstrate that I'm not just throwing it out there because I find it convenient, we're actually going to talk about the number of people in the country illegally combined with what the voter laws are in the various states. And we're going to show you some of the most ridiculous voting laws that I promise you, you're going to hear this and go, that can't be legal. That can't be right. It is. And then we're going to tell you the most important part about all of that. And that is which Republicans are the biggest problem in the United States Senate right now. Which Republicans need primary challenges. They need to know now. Some of them are not going to be up for re-election for like another 5 years. They need to know now they are getting a primary challenger if they do not vote for the SAVE Act. If they do not come out and rigorously support the SAVE Act, these are the guys. We're going to give you the names that need to get the primaries. All right, let's jump into the first part here. And this has to do with what does the SAVE Act actually do? Now, Christian and I can both tell you, because we've both been involved. I've been an elected official. Christian was my chief of staff for a while, that when it comes to what happens within legislation, things can change. You can bring up legitimate concerns, and then what happens is people go through and they actually change it. They amend the bill in order to address some of those concerns. And that's fine. That's what's supposed to happen. Sometimes you come with a pretty good idea and there's some things you didn't think about. Issues get brought up, and so you adjust it. But here's what actually passed out of the House and is being considered by the Senate, all right? So the big part about what the SAVE Act does is states are prohibited from accepting or processing any voter registration application for federal elections unless the applicant provides acceptable documentary proof of citizenship in person at the time of application. This applies to all methods, effectively ending mail-in or online registration without in-person verification in many cases. Defines acceptable documentary proof of citizenship. Remember, this is primarily about registering to vote, okay? A real ID compliant identification that indicates U.S. citizenship, though real IDs typically don't list citizenship status explicitly. A valid U.S. passport. A military ID combined with a military service record showing U.S. birthplace. A government-issued photo ID indicating U.S. birthplace or citizenship. Other specified documents like naturalization certificates or certain tribal IDs, American Indian card classified as KIC. Driver's license, even real IDs alone, generally do not suffice unless they explicitly indicate citizenship. And then heritage action, key vote explanation, referring to similar prior version provisions moving forward. So this mandates alternative processes for those without standard documents. States must establish an alternative verification process where applicants can submit other evidence of citizenship and sign an attestation under penalty of perjury that they are U.S. citizens and eligible to vote. This provides some flexibility, but still requires verification beyond simple affirmation. Yeah, that's the point. We don't want verification in the form of just simple affirmation. Yeah, I'm an American citizen. No, you need to be able to demonstrate it. And again, for all the people complaining about this is supposed to be a state issue, not a federal issue. It's about voting in federal elections. You don't got to have any of this for your state elections. Do whatever you want. But when you're actually electing members of Congress to the federal government, these are some of the requirements. Requires accommodations for name discrepancies and disabilities. States must handle cases where names differ on documents due to marriage and provide reasonable accommodations for disabled applicants to avoid undue barriers. This is a part of everybody screaming that married women who change their names are no longer going to be allowed to vote. Oh, no. Nope. They've actually commented there and said you got to make accommodations for these. Requires states to remove non-citizens from voter rolls. Oh my gosh, what an unreasonable request. States must use federal databases, DHS, SAVE System, SSA, to identify and purge non-citizens from voter registration lists when verified information shows ineligibility. This strengthens list maintenance to prevent ineligible voting. Imposes criminal penalties for non-compliance. Election officials or others who register individuals without required proof face potential criminal penalties, reinforcing enforcement. And it applies to only federal elections. Okay? So this is what passed out of the House. This is what we're debating. So a lot of the other stuff that you've heard, this is what it does. This is what it does, okay? And the reason why that's so important to point out is because of the constant fear-mongering that has been taking place in this discussion. All right, to go ahead and show you this from Fox, the House is, this is a little bit, there are common sense measures that protect American voters, Scalise explained to Fox News Digital on Thursday. Only Democrats in Congress could oppose these basic requirements to prevent voter fraud, and that's because they want illegal aliens to vote in our elections. Why else would they support open borders, oppose deporting illegal aliens, and oppose election security like Picture ID? The Save America Act is an updated version of Roy's Safeguarding American Voter Eligibility Act, which passed the House in April of 2025, but was never taken up in the Senate. So the important thing to understand here is that the House has actually made adjustments to this bill. Susan Collins, who was one of the U.S. senators that had originally opposed the SAVE Act in its original form, has apparently now come out and said, okay, I will support this version of it. And then again, the primary opposition that you're hearing from the left is that this is all about voter suppression, that this discriminates against women who changed their name when they got married. And that's all this is, right? And then the third thing that you will always hear from the left is that voter fraud is actually incredibly rare. And usually the numbers that they look for voter fraud are people convicted of voter fraud, right? That's what they're actually using in order to justify this idea that voter fraud barely ever happens. All right, so now what we're going to do, now that you know what's actually in the SAVE Act and that the House has already passed it, now we're going to actually look at some of those opposing points. We're going to look at what the left claims about it, and then we're going to try to address some of these issues. And that's where I want to talk about our good friends over at Brave Books, because as parents, we all want to raise our kids who are ready for the world they're going to inherit, especially with so many different alternative theories about reality competing for their attention. Brave Books stands out by offering pro-God, pro-America stories that teach courage, faith, and love of country, lessons that many in our culture are often trying to erase. Right? And the great thing about Brave Books is not only do they provide excellent books for your kids to read, but they also have Brave Plus, where you can go on there and it's a parent-approved streaming service. Because how many of us as parents have been in a position where, look, you want to pay attention to everything that your kids are watching or reading, but you're busy, you're out doing things, you're wrapping presents, you're cooking dinner, whatever it might be. And you want to be able to have a source to be able to get literature, to be able to get entertainment for your kids that is both legitimately entertaining, like good quality stuff, plus is actually conveying the sort of values that you want. Well, right now you can go to bravebooks.com/Nick. Use code Nick for 20% off your first order and free access to Brave's parent-vetted streaming platform when you join the Brave Book Club. Again, that's bravebooks.com/Nick. And don't forget to use code Nick for 20% off your order. Go check them out. You're gonna love them. All right, Christian, before we jump in, some of these accusations about the idea that, oh my gosh, there's just no problem with any voter fraud or anything of that nature. Did you have any points you wanted to bring up about the first thing about the SAVE Act and its importance?
Well, I mean, the obvious thing is, why wasn't this passed any sooner, right? Like,
Yeah.
it should be pretty obvious that like we need voter ID in this country, and there's only one reason the Democrats oppose this, and it's because they think they politically benefit from it.
Yeah.
Which is actually like kind of interesting if you think about it, right? Because one side opposes this bill for really obvious reasons. It's just because they think that they're going to lose out politically for it.
Yeah.
But one of their arguments against the bill is kind of self-defeating if you think about it, right? It's like, oh, married women aren't going to be able to vote. Why on earth would Republicans pass a law that prevents their own voter base from voting for them? Like, we forget for a minute, like when we talk about politics, we're usually like, oh, women vote for Democrats and men vote for Republicans, but that's a very broad category, right? What type of men, what type of women?
Mm-hmm.
Married women are Republican voters as a whole. Like
Yeah.
when taken as a whole, married women in the United States vote Republican. Unmarried women are the ones that vote Democrat. So it just like if you're thinking from just a raw, real
Political
politics,
power
pure
play.
politics,
Yeah.
it makes absolutely no sense to disenfranchise your own voter base. There is no reason for Republicans to pass a bill that would be stripping, again, their own voters from the ability to vote. So it's really self-defeating if you think about it, because the entire reason the Democrats are opposing this bill is quite literally because they think that they're going to lose out for it. So that just set that aside for a second. Married women aren't going to be able to vote. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Republicans are not going to be passing a bill to disenfranchise their own voter base.
Yeah.
But on the second front about, voter ID and illegal, acts of voting, to say nothing of illegals voting, right? We live in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a bill. I'll read it off. There is a bill, HB 968, that Delegate Sia Price, who you are very familiar with.
Oh, yeah. She chairs privileges and elections in the House of Delegates. So she's not just some rando delegate. She's the chairman for privileges and elections. She's the one that's supposed to be helping to secure and make sure that we have safe and secure elections.
She is.
Yeah.
She's securing them for Democrats.
Yeah. Yeah. What does her bill do?
So this bill, HB 968, literally does nothing else, bans the hand counting of ballots.
It bans them if they can be counted by a machine.
Yeah. Well, again, unless there's physically no other way, bans the hand counting of ballots in an election. And it's passed.
Yeah.
It's passed the General Assembly. It's waiting for Spanberger's signature here in Virginia before it becomes law. Ask yourself why on earth you would pass a bill to outlaw hand counting ballot. Like, that's in some ways that's the most reliable way to count a ballot.
Mm-hmm.
There was an election recently. It's about a year ago. There was an election that took place in Taiwan, right? They had a presidential election, and there were, film cameras, news crews that were in the polling stations after the ballots had all been cast, right? It was in the evening. And they were, pulling the ballots out of a box, holding them in the air, showing all the cameras, everything, the ballot, and then they set it on a table, and then they pulled the next one out. And you had election workers that were doing that all night long, and they managed to count. This is a whole country, right? There's millions and millions of people that live in Taiwan.
Yeah.
If it was a U.S. state, it would be one of the even though it's tiny geographically, it would be one of the largest states in the country. And they counted the entire election in a matter of a few hours.
Yeah.
In California, it takes you weeks to count all the ballots.
Yeah.
And they managed to do it, hand counting, right? They managed to do the whole thing in just a few hours. It would be illegal in Virginia to do the exact type of method that they do in Taiwan here in Virginia if this bill it's already passed, right? If it gets signed into law by Governor Spanberger. And so the reason I bring this story up is because it really illustrates like where Democrats are coming from. They're attacking the SAVE Act at the federal level at the same time that at the state level, when they have complete and total control like they do in Virginia, they're quite literally passing laws that are going to effectively make it easier for you to engage in voting.
Well, and I'm going to have some practical experience. I'm going to have some practical stories to go over in Virginia, since obviously I know a little something about both being in the legislature there and running for office there. But first, I want to share this real quick. And this is just kind of like a breakdown of some of the main opposition points. And this comes from the Bipartisan Policy Center or the Brennan Center. A lot of these things that advertise themselves as bipartisan are absolutely not, just so you know. But opposition point one, the act creates unnecessary barriers. Again, whenever you see unnecessary barriers, according to who, right? Disenfranchising millions without easy access to documents like passports or birth certificates. So once again, I want to look at two things that they're saying here. Creates an unnecessary barrier. First of all, there are obvious barriers to voting, right? Like you might have to get up and go to a polling location. You might have to show some sort of ID. All of these represent barriers to voting. But the thing is there are necessary barriers and there are unnecessary barriers. And the way you distinguish between the two is security versus ease, right? So they're just asserting that this is an unnecessary. Then they say disenfranchising. This bill doesn't disenfranchise anyone unless you're not legally permitted to vote. What it does do is does create certain requirements, right? But the vast majority of the country, Republican, Democrat, white, black, brown, doesn't matter. The vast majority of the country agrees that you should have to prove your citizenship to vote, that you should have to show photo ID to vote. They agree with that. But again, you look at the way this bipartisan policy center words this: unnecessary barriers, that's opinion, not fact, disenfranchising millions without easy access to documents. That's also an opinion, not fact. But they push these things as, no, this is the way it is. This is what will happen. Access to with easy access to documents like passports or birth certificates. First of all, almost everything that we're talking about here, like a passport you can go and get, but you got to pay for it. Okay. But then you can have a birth certificate. You don't got to pay for your birth certificate. But let's say that you did. Let's say in some states, okay, fine. If you want to pass state laws, and the states are free to do this, to say, we're going to allow you to be able to access an electronic copy of your birth certificate, right? Or whatever meets the federal requirements, they could do that. That is totally within the power of the states to be able to do that. And it wouldn't cost much. There you go. You can go request a birth certificate right now. Affects women with name changes, rural voters, or low-income citizens. Oh, yes, I am just certain the Democrats are super concerned about rural voters. I mean, Christian, didn't you see how concerned Democrats were about rural voters in Virginia, where they essentially wiped out any congressional district save one for any sort of rural representation by gerrymandering it, by running a district all the way from the Shenandoah Valley to Fairfax, Alexandria, and Arlington, Virginia. Spare me your concern for rural voters. You do not care. And then it's the whole.
Can I say one more thing?
Well, wait 1 second. I want to get to the last part. And the last part is this disenfranchises low-income citizens. Every single state here, the same states that are handing out billions of dollars in welfare fraud to illegal immigrants, could, by just getting rid of the fraud that they hand out, could provide free access to these citizens' documentation with respect to birth certificates. They could do it. They could pass that law right now in order to comply with federal law. They could do it. But they won't. Why? That's the thing that you got to ask yourself. So what did you want to say on that, Christian?
Yeah, on the rural voter thing. So like one of your first objections was what was it? It was like barriers to voting, right? You
Yeah.
know, it creates unnecessary. If you scroll up, what was it? It was unnecessary barriers.
Yeah.
Okay. So by that, I mean, you were bringing up rural voting. What's interesting is that in many respects, there's barriers to voting that exist living in a rural locality that don't exist in an urban locality, right? My parents live significantly further away from their local DMV than somebody who lives in, say, Arlington.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you live like way out in the countryside, and we live in a relatively rural county, right? There is a town, but we live in a relatively rural county. Your commute to get to the DMV to like get a new license or anything like that is significantly longer than if you lived in a city, right? Where you could just potentially walk to your local DMV.
Yeah.
So, or if you live in a suburb, right, where it'd be maybe a much shorter drive to the DMV. Think about like a very rural county, right? That's a barrier to voting in a way, right? Geography of where you live is a barrier to voting. And yet I don't see Democrats saying, therefore, we need to be finding a way to, mail everybody in Tazewell County a ballot. They don't want that to happen at all, right?
Well, they do it in some places, but
no, they want to mail ballots to Richmond City. They would not want to be mailing ballots to Tazewell County. Now, if they get the choice of mail it to everybody, right, like what you saw during COVID, they would do that because it's a net benefit to them. But they would not be supportive of, say, making it easier to get access to balloting if you're from a place like Southwest Virginia. And the reason for it is because Southwest Virginia voted over 80% for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well,
and Southwest Virginia is overwhelmingly rural. My point is that there's a multitude of things that you could classify as a barrier to voting. Your geography is one example, and yet Democrats they're not really concerned at all about that because their voters aren't in rural America. So why would you take up, any sort of issue with it? So ultimately it's a disingenuous objection. And quite frankly, like, I'm not really concerned what these people have to say about this bill. I'm more concerned about the Republicans that refuse to
Yeah,
pass it.
but we're not there yet. We're not there yet, right? The
Okay,
conservative
I'm jumping ahead.
yes, the conservative response is non-citizen voting is already illegal, but without proof it's unenforceable. And we're gonna demonstrate how that's the reality. The act provides alternatives like database checks, and states can adapt. It's a small step for security, not suppression. And that's the important part to remember is, right, anything beyond you being able to think of the candidate you want and them getting elected, right, is obviously a barrier. If I've got to fill out an absentee ballot, if I've got to drive to the polls, if I got to show to, those are all barriers. But the reason why we have those barriers is because we want secure elections. So everything is a balance between barriers and convenience. If you go too heavy on the convenience, yes, you will get more people voting, but then you will get people voting who shouldn't be, or who are voting illegally, or who are here illegally. And if you get that, you are disenfranchising every other voter, right? For every illegal vote, you disenfranchise illegal vote. So there has to be a balance between security and convenience. I'm going to jump to opposition point 3 because I want to do 2 last. But opposition point 3 is this ends voter registration drives and online mail options, burdening election officials and voters. Well, okay, drives can continue with on-site verification, and the focus is on accuracy over convenience. You see, this is the problem, is that when we point out that, hey, look, there's real problems here with respect to potential voter fraud, their response is that, well, but you're going to make it harder for people to vote. No, we want to make sure that you can vote, but you have to prove that you're a U.S. citizen to vote. Otherwise, you disenfranchise U.S. citizens by allowing other people to vote. So again, this is all part of the balancing act. Now, opposition point 2 that they have here is it's a solution to a non-problem. Non-citizen voting is rare, and current affirmations under penalty of perjury suffice. So first of all, the conservative response they offered here is even rare instances can swing close elections. That's true. Conservatives point to reports of thousands of non-citizens on rolls in states like Virginia. The act ensures verification, protecting against fraud without overhauling systems. This is the point I want to hammer home really hard to people. Okay. Now, so first of all, when we actually look at how many people are in the country illegally, the numbers vary, right? Pew Research says that unauthorized immigrant population reached a record high of 14 million in 2023. Migration Policy Institute estimated 13.7 million unauthorized immigrants as of mid-2023. Department of Homeland Security, the most recent detailed public estimate was around 11 million as of January 2022. Other sources and ranges, various analysts place the range at roughly 12.2 to 14 million nationally. Okay. Studies suggesting up to 15 million or more are in early 2025. Then this is before some of the declines of people self-deporting and deportations and things of that nature. So you have millions of people in the country illegally. So that is one source of potential voter fraud. The other problem that we have is people gaming the system, people actually stuffing ballot boxes. We've seen videos of things like that. We've seen issues where college students will fill out their absentee ballot in their home state and then do same-day voter registration on their college campus and vote again in the place that they're actually going to school. We've seen that as well. And the problem is that it's difficult to verify across state lines. And once the election is over, how many judges do you think are going to come back and overthrow an election result? I'll give you the answer. It's 0. That's how many. Now, before anybody tells me that I'm not looking at this correctly, I want to go over some of the most notable states with highly permissive voter registration and voting access as of March 2026. These are actual laws on the books. This is not hyperbole. This is not some sort of weird way to describe it. Is North Dakota, no voter registration required at all. Voters prove eligibility or residency on site with ID or other verification. Counties can opt into all mail elections for some contests. Oregon, same day registration available during early voting and election day in some contexts with strong overall access. All mail elections statewide. Ballots are automatically mailed to all registered voter without request. What happens if you moved and you didn't actually change that? What happens if you have other people that are there? What happens if somebody else fills out your ballot? Automatic voter registration implemented via DMV and other agencies. So as soon as you go get your vehicle, it's just automatic. You're registered to vote. No excuse mail voting is in the primary method. Colorado, same-day voter registration on election day and during early voting. Here's the other thing I want to ask you. Let's say you're here illegally, right? And you show up and you register to vote, or let's say that you just moved to a state, or let's say you're going to a college in another state, or let's say you want to do something nefarious. You get to show up on election day, register, vote right there. Do you think the polling location where you are registering to vote is going through the entire process of vetting you? Do you think that's actually happening? All mail-in state elections, ballots automatically mailed to all registered voters without request. Automatic voter registration implemented, highly flexible proof options, and drop boxes. This is the part where you just drop your ballot off at the drop box. Yeah, I'm sure nobody would stuff a ballot box. I'm sure that wouldn't happen. Washington, same-day voter registration, all mail elections statewide, automatic voter registration, no excuse mail voting documents. California, same-day voter registration, all mail elections statewide, automatic voter registration implemented, broad no excuse absentee options and flexible version. Hawaii, same-day registration available, all mail elections statewide, automatic voter registration DMV. Nevada, same-day registration available, all mail. You see the trend here, right? Pretty much everywhere. Here's the best one. This is the one I really love. Minnesota, same-day registration on election day and during early voting. Vouching allowed. A registered voter from the same precinct can vouch for up to 8 unregistered voters by signing an oath. Minimal, no additional docs needed in many cases. That's right. So your local liberal woke activist that was just busy trying to run over an ICE agent can walk in 8 people and vouch for them and say, yep, they're American citizens. And the law in Minnesota is, sounds good to me. Oh, I'm sure no voter fraud is taking place as a result of that, right? Just absolutely none. Absolutely none. See, this is the part where conservatives look at this and say, here's how I know Democrats are absolutely full of it. It's because when they look at the numbers for voter fraud, they look at, well, I think we're only going to look at convictions. Accusations of voter fraud is not sufficient, right? You're a law and order sort of guy. Correct. Except when you create the sort of situations where you have made voting illegal incredibly easy, and then you staff your district attorneys, your Commonwealth attorneys, and your attorney generals with people who flat out refuse to investigate or prosecute any sort of voter fraud except the most egregious, combined with judges who are not going to overturn election results, even if large fraud is indicated, because, well, that would just be unprecedented. So you've created the conditions where people can show up, swing elections in major races, especially in races which are going to be decided by less than 2% of the vote. Same-day voter registration, which makes it easier to cheat. You're letting massive illegals come into the country. And then you're staffing your legal apparatus with people that want them to vote. So you didn't stop the people from not voting from voting. You don't want to put in the proper safeguards. You've created all kinds of lax voting laws, which makes it really easy to cheat. And then you have a law enforcement apparatus that doesn't want to actually go after voter fraud because they benefit from it. Because here's the other thing I've personally noticed. When we do find cases of voter fraud, which party benefits? When was the last time a conservative candidate won a race as a result of, let's say, really shady and lax voting laws? How about never? I was stationed in Washington State. When Dino Rossi was running for governor. I had just been stationed there. And Dino Rossi won on election night. And they're like, oh, no, it's too close. And then so they had a recount. And Dino Rossi won the recount. Oh, but it was super close. We need to have another recount. And then Dino Rossi won the recount again. And then, we found all these ballots that were misplaced in King County, where Seattle is. And all of a sudden, Dino Rossi lost on the 3rd recount. And that's when everybody said, you know what? The people of Washington State have been put through enough. We now have the actual winner. Now that we found all of these votes in King County, Washington State. Now, I want you to reverse that for a second. I want you to imagine a scenario where the Democrat won on election day, won the first recount, won the second recount, and we just kept counting ballots. And then we found a bunch in a rural red county And all of a sudden the Republican won, and Republicans said with a completely straight face, you know what, guys, this has gone on too long. Now that we have the winner we wanted, everything just needs to stop. And that just happens. Oh, well, Nick, you're just talking about Washington. That was a while back. Okay. How about in my race in Virginia, where I won on election night? I was winning the next morning, and then a thumb drive shows up. A thumb drive shows up with over 50, I think it was 15,000 votes. And well, it got mislabeled, Nick. The thumb drive got mislabeled. Oh, it got mislabeled and misplaced in the bluest county in the district. Oh, there was thousands of absentee ballots that were sent out to people that never requested them. So thousands of ballots got returned from people that were sent out that never requested them. And I had a reporter say, well, Nick, are you claiming that the election was stolen from you? And I looked her dead in the eye. I said, I have a better question. I said, because I've not claimed that the election was stolen from me. I've claimed that that's horrible practice and procedure, and it's shady as hell. I said, but let me ask you something, reporter. If on election night, Abigail Spanberger had won, if the next morning Abigail Spanberger had won, and then all of a sudden a thumb drive showed up in my home county of Culpeper County, one of the reddest counties in the district, and all of a sudden there was enough votes on there to completely swing the election in my favor, would you be asking some questions on the proper handling of thumb drives with 15,000 votes on them? Would you be asking some important questions about how that was permitted to happen, how that was allowed to happen, how that was appropriate? She goes, yes. Yeah, but you're not in this case, are you? No, instead what you're doing is you're grilling me about whether or not I've challenged if the election was stolen. And this is why, from me to you, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a moderate, I had a ton of people try to fry me the other day for a post I did about this, where they said, Nick, you're being disingenuous. Millions of women are going to lose their right to vote. No, they're not. You're being disingenuous. I did the research, Nick, and I looked at the heritage map and only 1,600 cases of voter fraud. No, those are where we actually have convictions. Those are where we actually have such overwhelming proof that it absolutely cannot be denied. But you have actually set the rules in such a way to where it is incredibly difficult to identify and prosecute, especially before the fact, before the results are in. And then you staff it with law enforcement personnel that don't want to investigate and don't want to prosecute. And then you have the audacity. And then the only party that seems to win from these lax voting laws is you guys. At the same time that you are also supporting millions of people coming into the country, millions of people staying illegally in the country. And you have the audacity to tell us that we got nothing to worry about, that we're blowing this out of proportion, that this is a solution in search of a problem. This is why what Christian said before is absolutely true for me. At this point, when the left launches any sort of concern, my immediate response is, oh, you don't like this? I want more of it. Oh, you don't like this? How do we do it harder? Because I've already recognized that we can't have an objective conversation based off of reality. No, this benefits you, so you like it. And if it didn't benefit you, you would hate it. Right? If Republicans were winning elections based off of really lax voting laws and a bunch of illegals coming into the country and voting Republican, first of all, you would not just have high walls on the borders, you'd have high walls with concertina wire minefields and machine guns. Right? If all of a sudden the people voting illegally were benefiting Republicans, if we're swinging elections in favor of Republicans, you wouldn't just require photo ID, you would require freaking DNA tests. You would require someone come in there and get a freaking tattoo signifying that they were a U.S. citizen. We all know you would, because we see it in the areas that don't benefit you as much. And so the disingenuous arguments are absolutely over. I don't even care anymore.
Keep in mind, too, that like part of the reason that we have an immigration crisis right now, and that we have had one really since Biden came in, is because the Democrats are trying to import a new voting bloc.
Yeah.
Right. It's the thought process that like, well, if the existing electorate isn't going to vote for you, just bring in a new one.
Yeah, we don't have enough kids. Like, this is Democrats. Democrats are, we don't have enough kids. We keep aborting ours, or we don't have them. So we're going to lose, right? Because democracy is a number game, right? We're going to lose. So we've got to import a population, or we've got to educate the conservatives' kids. Well, more conservatives are taking their kids out of the public school system ever since COVID showed exactly what was going on in the classroom. So they're losing the grip on some of that. Social media has provided a complete bulwark against the established experts within the media and academia and everything else. So that's a problem. And so, yeah, they've got to try to import They've got to try to import a voting bloc, which they can immediately get onto welfare programs or help engage in the grift. And then that's what they do. It's like places like Minnesota. It's like, okay, we're going to bring over, hundreds of thousands of people. And then we're going to immediately get them in within our system and getting money from our politicians. And they're going to vote in block for our politicians until, of course, they get enough people where they can vote in block for their politicians, which is starting to happen in Minnesota.
It's also happening in the UK, right?
Yeah.
They got their like independent Gaza MPs elected in the last election. It happens in a lot of Western countries, but like that, if you think about it, like that is directly a form of election interference, right?
Yeah.
Open borders, mass migration, illegal immigration, with the intention of one day we're going to grant these people amnesty and a pathway to citizenship. That's an explicit attempt to manipulate an election process by importing a new electorate that presumably is going to vote for you.
Yeah.
And Democrats are perfectly fine with that for obvious reasons, right? Because it benefits them politically. So, like, I'm just not interested really at all in any of these objections to the SAVE Act because one party has realized, oh, wait a second, democracy is not actually this like fixed thing, right? It's actually something that you can manipulate the rules to your benefit. In some ways, that's actually how you win. You can win an election before any ballots are even cast if you can manipulate who gets to fall into the category of the electorate to begin with, right? If you redefine the electorate to be anybody that walked into this country, in the 4 years during the Biden administration, anybody that we can import into this country and grant amnesty and citizenship to, it doesn't really matter what the election rules are because you've redefined the electorate so much in your favor that you've already won before any ballots are cast. So like, I'm just not interested. I mean, just like you, I'm not interested really at all in any of the objections to it. I'm far more interested in how do we actually get this thing passed? Because unfortunately, it's just kind of a fact of the modern day that like Congress is pretty impotent if you think about it, right? Like they there's nothing that Congress wants to do less than actually govern, right?
Well,
than actually pass legislation.
So when it comes to the SAVE Act, let's be fair about this. The House has passed the SAVE Act, and so now it's over to the Senate. And that's what we're going to discuss next. We're going to talk about what is going on in the Senate, but more importantly, we're going to talk about something you can actually do about it, something that you can actually do that will actually have an impact on whether or not the SAVE Act gets taken up by the Senate the way it should. But before we get to that, I want to talk about our friends and partners from Lear Capital, because here's the deal. Again to Lear and go check those guys out. All right, Christian, now we get to the question that we've all been waiting for, and that has to do with kind of like the people that are the problem here. And we've got a few. We've got a few people in the Senate. Now, I want to remind everyone of what our rule is on this. Our rule is that you don't go after senators that are barely winning their seats. So let me give a perfect example of this. When I went out on X and I posted about this, I had people going like, oh, Susan Collins is horrible. Okay, first of all, Susan Collins had some concerns with respect to, will states be permitted to come up with certain workarounds for like, women who change their names, and is there a way to get access to birth certificates? And the feds in the House basically said, yes, we will totally allow for states to come up with their process for being able to make it easy, cheap, free to get your birth certificates and to get the documentation you need in order to register to vote. So when Susan Collins looked at all of that, the latest report I got is Susan Collins said, okay, I'll vote for it. But here's the thing to keep in mind. You are not getting Ted Cruz or Rand Paul or, Kennedy. You're not getting that guy in Maine. Susan Collins is the most conservative Republican senator you will get from the state of Maine. So here's an idea. If we're going to target people, we're going to target Republican senators that need to be taught a lesson. We don't look at the ones who barely win their race. We don't look at the ones where it's the best version of what we can get for that particular state. Not because we still shouldn't try to apply pressure or get them to vote the way that we want, but because we understand that there's a very, very different practical reality there. But Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Christian, do you even know the last time Alaska voted for like a Democrat president?
Yeah, it was LBJ in 1964.
There you go. 1964, the last time Alaska went for a Republican or went for a Democrat president. Now, how does that relate to the Senate? Well, because the Senate's also a statewide race in Alaska. And so the question is what is the likelihood? Like, is Lisa Murkowski doing this because she's like, gosh, I'm just really concerned about my next Senate race. Like, I might not win if I vote for the SAVE Act. No, Senator Murkowski, you will not win if you don't vote for the SAVE Act. But this is the sort of crap we've gotten used to with people like Lisa Murkowski. They see their job as being in the Senate in order to bring home the bacon to Alaska. When it comes to actually trying to save the culture or the country, Lisa Murkowski doesn't appear to care because she's the sort of person that is cozied up so much to the left that she'll be the one that gets sent to the gulag last, right? She'll still get her budget amendments in because she's one of the good Republican senators that doesn't like Trump and works across the aisle. And in this case, she's apparently willing to do it to the complete and total detriment of the United States. So Lisa Murkowski is, let me see if I got the actual time when she's coming up. Lisa Murkowski is not coming up for election, I think, until 2028. But the reason why you need a primary challenger now, and again, don't just pick some weirdo. Please, for the love of God, don't pick some just weirdo that yells and screams a lot. You have to pick someone that can, have some sort of name recognition in Alaska, is willing to challenge her, is willing to do it. And from what I understand, there's a former governor running in Alaska that would be willing to do that has actually expressed interest in running against Lisa Murkowski. And what I'm saying is you have to do it now. You can't wait a couple of years to announce. You have to say, look, Lisa Murkowski is holding back the SAVE Act. This is absolutely critical to saving the country. And so I'm going to run against her because of that. Force Lisa Murkowski into a position where she has to vote for this. And I'll give you a perfect example. Christian and I talked about this with John Cornyn in Texas. John Cornyn is one of those guys that will do what leadership tells him to do. But right now, John Cornyn is set to lose against Paxton in Texas. He is definitely set to lose. The primary was incredibly close. It's going to a runoff. I think most of the Wesley Hunt votes are going to go over to Paxton. So Cornyn is probably one of those guys that is kicking in Thune's door right now going, you've got to bring this to a vote. I've got to be able to demonstrate that I have done something to vote for the SAVE Act. So when you have someone like Senator Murkowski in a safe Republican state where that seat could and should go to a real conservative, that's the person that you need to really go after. Christian, what are some other ones that you were thinking about?
I mean, in some ways, you got to pressure Thune to actually allow for a vote on this, right? Look, here's the problem. We don't have the votes to break a Democrat filibuster, right?
Yeah.
You need 60 votes to invoke cloture. And we don't have that. We have 53 seats in the Senate. In a good day, we might be able to get Fetterman. We're probably not on this bill, though. So, we've got 53 to work with. Well, if you've lost Murkowski, now you're down to 52. And if you've lost McConnell, which you probably have, McConnell has spoken out against this, which is just insane. If
ridiculous,
you think about it.
Absolutely absurd. It's McConnell just being petulant.
Now you're down to 51,
Yeah.
right? And if you lose one more, now you're down to 50, and you need J.D. Vance in the chamber in order to break a tie in our favor.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact of the matter is that the biggest problem that we have is we don't have the votes to break cloture. And so now you have the question of, okay, so then just nuke the filibuster. Well, I'd be in favor of that simply because the Democrats don't respect the filibuster and have said the second that they retake power, they're going to get rid of it. If that weren't the case, you could make the argument to keep the filibuster. But we know that the Democrats are going to kill the filibuster the next time that they have a trifecta. They almost did it previously.
Yeah. Well,
it was Joe Manchin and Sinema that stopped it, but neither of those two people are there anymore for a reason, right?
Democrats
ran them out of town.
They can't win a Democrat election anymore. The other thing, too, that's important to understand is that they didn't just say we're going to get rid of the filibuster because we want to do what we want. They said the filibuster is a relic of Jim Crow. Keep in mind, the same people now that are saying that the filibuster is an absolutely essential part of our republic were 5 seconds ago saying that it was racist. Because again, they don't feel any need to make intellectually honest or consistent arguments. It's all about what helps them get power. But I want to bring up this. I misspoke earlier. I said Scott Presler. It was Brennan Leach that said, I asked Thune if he feels pressured to pass Save American Act mounting. He goes, a lot of that is, it's in that kind of, paid influencer ecosystem, he said. Adds there's support among GOP senators, but, quote, the process and how do you ultimately try and get a result is still unclear to me. And then Scott Presler responded by saying, paid influencer system, I don't receive a dime to do this work. It was after this interview with Fox News that President Trump put out a statement in support of my work and for the Save America Act. And this is the part where a lot of people are saying, yeah, this is the problem with Thune. And there's this other article that came out here. This one is from the Washington Examiner. And what it did is it talked about Thune chalks up MAGA pressure on Save America Act to paid influencer ecosystem. And yeah, this is the part that is just, I as soon as I saw this and as soon as I could kind of verify that, okay, yeah, this actually did happen. My automatic impulse at that point was he needs to go. I want him to have a primary challenger immediately. Because here's what's important to remember. Mike Lee has been bringing this up repeatedly. He's like, look, I'm not saying you got to get rid of the filibuster, right? Christian's saying get rid of it. Mike Lee's saying you don't got to get rid of it. Just go back to an actual speaking filibuster. Make them put their time, their money, their effort where their mouth is, and let's see how far they actually get. Because the end result is that after a while, they're going to tucker out, and they're not going to do it. Because when you actually look at where the citizens are with respect to this issue, they want to see more common sense things like voter ID laws. And so this is a winning issue for Republicans, and Thune refuses to do it because he wants to protect not just the filibuster, he wants to protect the non-speaking filibuster. And then as he looks at people like Lisa Murkowski or Tom Tillis in North Carolina or what's his name in Utah, John, I forget the senator's name in Utah. As you look at all these guys, you say, well, I don't have the votes.
John Curtis.
John Curtis in Utah. Another state that's overwhelmingly Republican, right? These are the guys that are holding this whole process up. And the way that you can be effective, not just in these, you don't got to be in these states to be effective in this particular race. What you need to do is right off the bat, you need to identify who are the people that are going to challenge them. We've already got candidates in North Carolina. I mean, I'm not necessarily thrilled about them. I'm hearing more stuff coming in. But Tom Tillis is not running for re-election, so we got a new person coming into the Senate. You need to be blowing up that guy's, social media right now saying, would you support the SAVE Act? I don't care if he can't vote on it right now. You ask him right now, would you support the SAVE Act? You need to do the same thing in Kentucky for whoever's going to replace McConnell. Then when it comes to Alaska and Utah, those are the two states that I think we need to focus on right now, Alaska and Utah and South Dakota. Alaska and Utah need to get challengers because Lisa Murkowski and Curtis need to know that the moment you are not publicly enthusiastic about the SAVE Act, we're challenging you. This is going to cost you. It has to. The whole Nick Fuentes thing of, you know what, I'm so mad at Republicans, I'm voting Democrat. That's idiotic. There's only two people that will vote Democrat in that place. There's the people that would always do it in the first place because they're plants. I'm sorry, there's three people. There's the people who are doing it because they're nothing more than they're controlled opposition. They are there to actually push the left, and they're just pretending to be on our side. That sort of person would push for people to vote for Democrats in 2028. The other person that would push for Democrats to vote in 2028 are morons, right? If you actually want the SAVE Act, if you actually want good conservative policy, you would never encourage anyone to vote for Democrats. And then the third one So you got the idiots, you got the controlled opposition, and then you got the third ones that are making their money off of content creation, and that's all they're after. They're after saying outlandish or ridiculous things or shocking things in order to click up views and money and everything else. That's what they're after, right? There's no consistent moral principle that they can actually appeal to. So there's your three reasons. Because here's the equivalent. If you want things like the SAVE Act, if you want things like ICE to be able to be fully funded and operate, if you want things like to be able to, provide for, greater school choice, if you want to be able to protect your Second Amendment rights, if you don't want kids being transed and surgically mutilated because they're gender confused, if you want those things, you would never vote for the Democrats. This is the equivalent of saying, you know what? I'm really upset with my police force, so I'm going to vote for the criminals. No, you don't want the criminals in charge. You want better cops. This is how you get better cops. This is how you get better Republicans, is the moment they do stuff like this, the entire base, not just in their state, the entire base zeroes in on the Republicans in safe districts or states that need to be primaried. And then when they start to find candidates that are willing to step up, and by the way, you got to be a decent candidate, right? If you want to know who does a really good job of like candidate, the Citizens Alliance of America does a great job on that. Young Americans for Liberty does candidate stuff like that. They primarily do it for the state level, but there's organizations out there that will actually do candidate academies and help vet candidates to make sure that they are both principled and competent. But when you have places like in Alaska where you have this governor that's allied with Trump saying, I'm going to run against Lisa Murkowski, I don't care what state you live in, you are going on there and you are flooding that social media with, you got to go, this is great, awesome, where do I donate, how do I support you? And then going over to Lisa Murkowski and being like, you're done. We're coming for you. Because if they're going to respond on this, if they're first of all, they're going to do it because, well, I'm concerned. I'm afraid. Okay, great. Then I want you to be more afraid of us than you are of the woke people that hate you anyway. Because we voted for you at some point because we trusted that you were actually going to stand for the things that you told us you believed in. And so now if you're not going to be motivated by principle, you're going to be motivated by fear. Okay, well, fine. We will bring all the electoral fear necessary in order to properly motivate you to do the right thing. And we didn't want it that way. You created those conditions. So here they are. So if you're in Alaska, if you're in South Dakota, if you're in Utah, your mission right now is find a decent candidate. Maybe find somebody really strong in your state legislature. Maybe find somebody that's really prominent within maybe a group or an organization that you like that operates in your state, that knows something about fundraising, that understands something about name recognition and elections. Go find one of those people and say, we really want to sit down and talk with you. And don't just say, we want you to run. Say, if you run, my check's already written for you. I will donate the money. I will put my money and my time where my mouth is if you're willing to get out there and run. Go do that. Alaska, you looks like you already got somebody. South Dakota, go find somebody. I guarantee you there's probably, Kristi Noem might be interested. I don't know, right? I've got some issues with Kristi Noem, but my gosh, she'd be better than Thune in the Senate.
Keep in mind that Thune did just recently come out and say that like the votes aren't there to nuke the filibuster, which we already knew that was the case, unfortunately. And the votes, at least from my perspective, unfortunately. And then he also said the votes aren't there for a talking filibuster. So the way that this works typically is that if there's a bill that comes up, the cloture rule is 60 votes, right? If there's a bill that comes up and the opposition party has at least 41 senators, and the vast majority of American history in the modern era, right, post 17th Amendment, it has been very rare. It has happened a few times, but it's basically only happened with Democrats. I think one time in the 20s, Republicans briefly had 60 senators. But in the last 100 years, Republicans have never had 60 senators. The most they've ever had is 55. They currently have 53. The way that this works right now is that if a bill comes up and the opposition party has at least 41 senators, they can say, we will filibuster this bill, and that's it. That's the end of it, because the other party will be like, okay, well, we don't have the votes for cloture, so this bill's dead. It's basically a form of like, it's almost like the ancient Polish equivalent of the golden veto that crippled the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, where you had like one guy stand up and say, I object, and that like just puts an end to the debate right then and there. But technically, if you really want to force the issue, you can bring the bill up, and then the other side would then have to actually stand and filibuster.
Well, can we just say this? Thune is full of crap when he says the votes aren't there for the standing filibuster. The reason why he's saying that is not because he's gone in and strong-armed all of these people. The reason why he's saying that, he's like, Hey, it's because
he's saying it because he doesn't want to strong arm.
He doesn't want to get rid of it, and he doesn't want to strong arm anyone. But the bottom line is Lisa Murkowski and Curtis would be incredibly vulnerable, right? And there's other people who would probably be vulnerable if they didn't vote for this. And he can go into either one of those and be like, look, it's real simple. I will take you off your committees. You will be punished for this because this is a core part of what we're trying to achieve. This is absolutely critical. The votes are there. You're going to vote for this. But he won't do any of that. Instead, he just wants to go, I don't know. They just don't want to do it. I guarantee you, if conservatives wanted to do something, right? I guarantee you, if this were at a point where there were 2 or 3 conservatives that were saying, gosh, I'm sorry, Majority Leader Thune, I know you really want to do this, but I just don't feel comfortable with it. And it was 2 conservative votes that were holding it up. John Thune would be in their office going, you want to lose your committee assignments? You want me to fund a primary challenger for you? You want me to cut a $2 million check to your opponent next primary season? Get on board. But no, it's not something moderates want. It's not something the left wants. It's not something the establishment wants. It's something conservatives want. It's something the base wants. And so we don't get the tough guy leader in John Thune, right? We would probably get tough guy John Thune if he was trying to punish conservatives. But when it comes to telling moderates in conservative states, dude, stand up and do your job. Nope. Oh, sorry, can't do it. Sorry, not my place. Not my place. Full of crap. If you're unwilling to do it from your very safe seat in South Dakota, then why'd you run for leader? We could have had Rick Scott, right? Rick would be in there right now telling Lisa and John, hey, look, we need to all be on the same sheet with this, right? There are things that we have done for you guys, and now this is a way that you reciprocate and you pay back the conservative wing. So there are things we have said yes to. There's things we said no to at your benefit. And now you're going to say yes to this for our benefit because this is how we all work together. And oh, by the way, here's the polling numbers from Utah and Alaska. This is wildly popular in your states. So we're going to do this. But no, we get John Thune, who will be Mr. Nice Guy to the moderates and then play hardball with us.
Yes, ultimately that's the problem. I mean, really, in all of this, we need one more guy. So the bill has 49 co-sponsors, and the 3 that are missing, so the ones that are missing are Murkowski, Collins. Interestingly, I understand why she's not a co-sponsor, even though her concerns have already been largely addressed at this point. And if the bill came up, I'd say it's at least a 50-50 shot that she would vote for it.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 are Mitch McConnell and John Curtis. Mitch McConnell is going to vote against it no matter what. He has always opposed what he calls federal intervention in elections. He opposes any federal laws at all about elections. He thinks that elections should entirely be run completely at the state level. There's probably nothing you can do to convince him to vote for the bill.
And let's also make a distinction here. I think this is only at the state level. There's any number of things that Mitch McConnell has voted for that are complete violations of what we would call constitutional purism, right? So he's full of crap. He's just selected this because this is his thing he's selected. Because even this doesn't impact anything at the state level. This has nothing to do with state elections. If you think about this, I'm a guy that's very much, I don't want the federal government being involved in stuff. But let's think about it for a second. If now all of a sudden California can have the sort of lax voting laws that will allow them to have a greater impact on federal elections than I can because we're following the rules. Well, no, I want them to follow the same rules. And again, it's not like the federal government is telling California how they have to run things for their election for governor or for their election for their state legislature. They're not telling them how to do anything. They're saying that, look, we're going to have some basic rules to make sure that the people serving in this body, which impact far more than just your state, actually are U.S. citizens. I don't think that's unreasonable, and I don't think that's out of line with what the founders would have wanted. But no, this is the constitutional hill Mitch McConnell is going to die on. The guy that couldn't care less when it comes to any number of other things. No, this is the hill he's going to die on. Give me a break.
I agree that it's like, how dare you federalize federal elections, right? But you're not going to win him over. He's like in his 80s. He's not running again. He's got nothing to lose. He's going to vote against it. The good news is that you got 53 seats. So he's out of contention. We've already addressed Susan Collins' objections. So you've only got 2 left. It's Murkowski and John Curtis. Now,
I still say
in Murkowski's case,
too.
Well, yes, Trump needs to strong arm him, but the conservative movement, the conservative base, needs to target those two people because they're the ones that are holding it up. It's Murkowski and John Curtis. I've already talked about again Collins and
yeah, we got it.
McConnell, but out of when you look at this, John Curtis is the easier target. He is not the senior senator from Utah.
Yeah.
Utah is an overwhelmingly conservative state with an overwhelming Republican majority. But when you think about it, Utah has a long track record of putting just the weakest, spineless, toothless Republicans in office.
Yeah.
Like there's something about Utah that loves these weak Republicans. Like John Cox, who's their governor, had like for a long time like his pronouns and his profile
they like nice
online.
Guys.
And,
they like nice guys.
Yeah, they love these like what Sam Francis called the beautiful losers. They love these people. But like Murkowski, she's been primaried in the past. You know what she did? She just ran as a write-in candidate and won.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help that in Alaska you have ranked choice voting, which overwhelmingly helps the Democrats. So until that gets rid of, like, it's probably going to be impossible to get rid of Murkowski. But John Curtis in Utah has to be the guy that the conservatives have to go after. There has to be a unified message that you will not win re-election if you oppose this thing, because he is, if you get the 50 co-sponsors, or if you get 50 people that are on board with this, yes, there is a way that you can change the rules, change the procedural mechanism in order to force a talking filibuster that Democrats will inevitably run out of steam on, right? You've got between now and next January. Hopefully you can get it before the midterms, but even then, like you've got months between now and the next Congress. The only thing that's lacking here is will. It's one guy and a lack of willpower to force a vote on this thing, basically, to change the rules, force the Democrats to actually speak out against it, go through all the procedural mechanisms of them putting forward a million different amendments, right? Like they'll do everything to bog it up, but ultimately it might delay the passage, but it won't prevent them from stopping it being passed. The only thing that's preventing it from being passed are not Democrats. It's one guy in Utah that's preventing it from being passed.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you need to do. You need to find a challenger for that guy. You need to intimidate him into doing the right thing. You need to electorally intimidate him. I'm not saying threaten his office. I'm not saying becoming a leftist and show up to Gracie Mansion with a bomb, right? Like that. We don't operate that way. That's the way they operate. I'm saying go find somebody that's a credible challenger for this guy. You've got some great guys in your state legislature in Utah that would probably have the name recognition, the ability to articulate it, and understanding of fundraising. And again, it might be that you don't beat the guy. It might be that it's just enough for him to understand, okay, I got to come over on this issue. And then mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. So that's the way I want you guys to think about it. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. Go check out our partners at Lear Capital and, of course, our partners over at Brave Books. It's a couple of great companies. If you liked what we had to say and you found it useful, maybe like, maybe subscribe, maybe follow, do all that fun stuff. If you think we're a bunch of morons, please go in. Christian loves to hear about how dumb we all are. So go ahead and leave those comments in there. Once again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. God bless, and we'll see you next episode.